We're following breaking news out of the Middle East. President Trump announced that the U.S. has attacked 3 nuclear sites in Iran. In a post on Truth Social, he called the attack successful and says the planes are now outside of Iranian airspace. Mr. Trump went on to write, quote, "Now is the time for peace." He also says he will address the United States from the White House at 10 p.m. Eastern time. This is the Truth Social message that he put out. Right now, we do have CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joining us right now with the very latest. Weijia.
Carissa, we are waiting for the president to speak in just about 1 hour, and certainly there are so many questions about how this was carried out and about the plans that led up to it. Because, of course, as we have been reporting, it was just on Thursday that he declared a self-imposed 2-week deadline for Iran to really have another chance, a final chance at diplomacy and trying to give them an off-ramp. Of course, that now appears like it was a ruse to give the Pentagon time to get its assets in order to take out this massive, unprecedented operation. I say that because earlier this week we interviewed the former Secretary of the Air Force under the Biden administration, who said this particular bomb has never actually been used in practice. It is a bunker buster bomb, an MOP, that has really been tested, and it was designed for a mission like this, to take out a nuclear site like Fordow, which we've also been reporting on, because it is its primary nuclear site right now for the Iranian nuclear program. And so there are a lot of outstanding questions, not only about the actual attack, but also about the implications afterward. Of course, you said in that president's post that he is now calling for peace, but it is almost unimaginable that there will not be retaliation on the part of the Iranians, who have made crystal clear leading up to this that if the U.S. were to involve themselves militarily and join Iran in its efforts to strike nuclear sites, that there would be consequences, forceful ones. And so at this hour, we are waiting to learn more from the region and certainly from President Trump, who again is supposed to speak in less than an hour now here at the White House. He just returned from his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, a few hours ago. He did walk by a group of reporters, and he sort of waved and gave his normal fist pump, but walked right into the White House without saying a word. And so we will wait to see what he has to say. But this is a massive development because, he had been signaling that there was still hope for diplomacy, which obviously was not the case.
Reaction from lawmakers on Capitol Hill so far?
Well, it really depends. It's pouring in. So there are, hawks that have been pushing for this sort of response, because this is not a new issue. Administrations for decades have been wondering how to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions. Of course, it was a historic deal that the Obama administration brokered years ago, the JCPOA it was known as. But as soon as President Trump came into office, he pulled out of that deal because he said it was not a good one. And so it depends on the lawmakers, but they have been very vocal, some of them, about the need to do something just like this. On the other hand, there are plenty of voices who were warning the president not to become directly involved because of the potential implications, not only for a wider conflict in the region, but what this could mean for U.S. troops in the region and on the ground.
Some have said in the past that no one wanted to see another U.S.-led war in the Middle East after the history that the U.S. has had with war in that region over the past several decades. Would it be fair to say that?
Well, the president himself said that many times on the campaign trail, many times as president, that he did not want the U.S. to be entangled in any foreign conflicts, which is exactly why there is a significant section of his MAGA base that is not on board with this plan, that we're urging him not to become involved, because this was a campaign promise to end all wars and certainly not to involve the U.S. in any other wars. The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, was asked about this directly during her last press briefing on Thursday, and her message to those skeptics about the possibility of a strike was to trust President Trump, was to trust any decision that he would make, because it would be for the best for national security.
At this point, what do we expect the president to tell the nation at 10 p.m.? I mean, there's so many questions right now.
I think he will share a lot of details about the actual success of the strike, which he has already declared in one of his posts. So we anticipate hearing more details about what he means when he says they were successful. There was reporting from other outlets, The Guardian exclusively actually, in an article that said one reason why he hadn't given the green light yet was because he did have some doubts about whether the operation would be fully successful. And our CBS News reporting was that he was briefed on all the pros and the cons about launching an attack on the Fordow nuclear site. But his mindset, his thinking was that he had to do it because he believed that was the only real way to ensure that Iran would not move even closer to having a nuclear weapon. And I just asked about this the other day for clarification on what he meant when he said they were just a few weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. And the press secretary told me that it wasn't just about having enough enriched uranium, which is the main component required to build one of these nuclear bombs. But she said that all it would take was the supreme leader making a decision to move forward, and they could have one within 2 weeks. And that is a very specific timeline. It doesn't exactly align with what the IAEA, which is the agency that monitors nuclear sites around the world, assessed. They said that Iran was not actively making a nuclear bomb, but they certainly had an unprecedented amount of that enriched uranium. The U.S. intelligence, the latest assessment that has been made public, also mirrored that. And so we will be listening to see if the president has more information about exactly what led to this big decision. But, you know, imagine he will also talk about what the plan is for next steps, because even though he wrote that now is the time for peace, the reality is that now is the time for many different stakeholders in this conflict to try to determine what the next steps are, because there's so much at stake here.
What do we know about the national security meeting that took place today?
Come back here around 6 p.m., which he did, and meet with his national security team, which is not out of the ordinary given the tight deadline that he had set for determining whether he was going to do this or not. He had been having frequent national security team meetings since he rushed back from the G7 summit earlier in the week, because he said he wanted to monitor the situation in Iran. And so we are trying to learn more about all the timing. We need a timeline, a tick-tock for exactly when this happened, and you know, where the president was. You know, how did he monitor these attacks? How did he receive information in real time as these teams were carrying them out? And again, what the plan is moving forward.
Do we know what Iranian state media is saying about all of this at this point, or have they said anything at all?
We are still, you know, this is obviously breaking news right now. So we are trying to get information from all of our teams in the region, from London, from Iran. And so far as just a few minutes ago, about 10 minutes ago, we have been monitoring Iranian press, and there has not been a formal response yet. So nothing out of Iran at this hour, but that is a critical question as we wait to see what the response is going to be.
And also response from the rest of the world, Europe, for example.
Well, Europe just had meetings to try to have a diplomatic end to all of this. And the thing is that the U.S. was not directly involved with those. And so the Europeans really were trying to, insert some kind of diplomacy and try to convince the Iranians to really come to the table with President Trump and the U.S. to discuss getting out of the conflict. But the Iranians made very clear that they would not engage in direct talks with the U.S. unless there was a ceasefire, unless Israel stopped bombing, stopped the attacks, and vice versa, obviously, because they said they wouldn't negotiate during an active war. But when I asked the White House about that, they dodged the question. They didn't say that that is something that the president was calling for. And in fact, he himself said that it's not something that he wanted, because he thought the situation had already moved beyond that he wanted something bigger than a ceasefire, that he really guarantee to an end of Iran's ambitions to develop a nuclear weapon.
So many questions that need to be answered tonight. In less than an hour, the president will be speaking at 10 p.m., as you mentioned, and we are awaiting what the president will say. But in the meantime, how do you think Democratic lawmakers are going to react to this news?
So we are gathering all of the reaction from these lawmakers on both sides, because this is obviously critical. But, I imagine that many of those voices will be saying they warned that something like this could happen, that there could be an escalation in the region. And so, again, we are just waiting to hear from more voices. And because this is just breaking and developing, some lawmakers are still getting read in on this, are still trying to get the latest intelligence on this. Of course, there were briefings on the Hill ahead of this. We know that the House Speaker was briefed ahead of the U.S. strike, and don't know whether he relayed that information. But this is a very ongoing situation, so we are just waiting to compile all of that reaction for you.
You've been following the White House for quite some time. What do you take of all of this that's happened, this unexpected bombing of Iran at this point with no warning whatsoever, especially given the fact that the president had said he was going to be giving Iran 2 weeks? So this comes as a complete surprise.
Well, it does and it doesn't, because there was always some concern that even the announcement of that 2-week window to try to reach a deal was just a head fake to, clear the path, essentially, for this to happen, because you can't just do this overnight. It takes time. It takes calculation. It takes, it takes the Pentagon and all of the teams that carry this out having the space to be able to do that. And so there was always one school of thinking that perhaps this was just an arbitrary deadline. But on the other hand, we had extensive reporting that there were loud voices and advisors surrounding the president who were, having him really think through whether this was the right move because of the potential implications and all the unknowns involved with this. And so with this particular president, it's not necessarily ever a surprise, even though it might be shocking, because it is unprecedented.
Unprecedented and quite the gamble as well. Let's talk about the sites that were hit. What do you know about this from covering the White House and these particular sites that were targeted? Weijia.
These are Iran's nuclear sites, and so obviously these are where they are developing their potential components for the weapons. Fordow is extremely tricky because it is built into the side of a mountain, and it is very difficult to get to, which is why the U.S. bunker buster bomb that was used, this particular kind of bomb, is really the only option to completely destroy Fordow. And we don't even know if that was the case, whether it completely took it out or just partially. But the 30-pound bomb had to also be transported by U.S. B-2s to drop it down, because you're talking about such massive, weaponry here. And so the hope, and President Trump said as much in his post, is that it was able to disable and decapitate, really, these sites that are so critical to Iran's nuclear program.